You know, there's always this like debate, right, when it comes to writing advice as to whether or not you should edit as you go or not. A lot of people seem to think that editing as you go is a surefire way to stop you from ever actually completing the story. But I think there is some value in kind of taking time to check your story as you're writing it. So, a common piece of writing wisdom is that your first draft is always going to be terrible. There's never a time when your first draft is ever going to be perfect, and for the most part, this is true. There's no story that you're going to get 100% exactly the way you want it in its first iteration, because as you write, you might discover more things. We can talk about plotting and, character sheets and this stuff all day long. The fact of the matter is, sometimes when you write stuff, new stuff just pops up into your head and you say, oh, wait a minute, that's a much better direction than where I was going. It's just how the writing process happens. But a lot of times people will tell you, well, no, don't edit as you go though, because if you edit as you go, you're never going to get the book done. You're just going to sit there picking away at like one chapter until it's perfect, which perfect doesn't exist, so it's totally redundant. However, I would argue that there are many times in writing where you really should pause and check to make sure that the story is still doing what you want it to do. Especially because sometimes you can be going down a direction with your story that you find out later is not at all what you want to do. And if you had caught that when it started bothering you down here and edited this before you continued, you would have saved yourself a lot of words that you then had to cut anyway. Personally, I think the advice of your first draft is always terrible no matter what, so just write whatever, is a lot more detrimental to actually finishing a book than not. So, and a good example of this is, as we were talking about last week with NaNoWriMo, I am sitting on a full completed standalone manuscript. The thing is though, in its first iteration, it was really, really bad. Genuinely. That's because while I was doing NaNoWriMo, my only focus was getting words down on the page. I wasn't really concerned with whether or not this was filler, or whether or not this was a plot hole, or whether or not this was logically consistent with a character. I was just trying to get the general frame of the story as fleshed out as possible, get as much meat on it as possible. But that means that even after 2 rounds of edits, I'm still very much looking at a lot of work to do. Because as I'm writing, there's obviously a lot of things that, had I actually had the time and attention to stop and think about it, edit as I go, plot some more, and not rush through all these words in this challenge, I probably would have smoothed them out a lot faster. With The Glass Witch was kind of a similar process, but I had an editor at the time who, rather than me giving me all of their words up front at once, rather than giving the whole book completed and saying, hey, read this through and edit it, we would more do like 25 pages at a time. So as I was writing, he was editing, and he was giving me feedback on what he was reading, which honestly stopped me from going a lot of really like messy, bad places with the book. And because of that, I'm kind of always chasing this feeling that I should be writing book 2 faster, when the reality is that without a second pair of eyes to help you as you go, it's a lot harder to find the pulse of the story without going back and looking at it over and over. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm writing and it starts feeling like I'm wading through quicksand and I just can't get the words down anymore, that's a sign to me that something has gone wrong that needs to be fixed, or else I won't be able to continue because everything will just not feel right. I think the moral of the story with a lot of writing advice is that all of it is good advice. None of it is good advice, because it's all very much dependent on who you are as a writer. So if you are the kind of writer who does, their best work, just kind of slapping everything down and just kind of looking at what you got, by all means go for it. But if you're someone who really cannot keep working, if you feel that something is not quite right, there is no shame in turning around, turn that ship around and actually fix it. Because if you continue writing the way that is logically consistent with what you've already put down, it just takes a story in a place that isn't as good as it could be. And you know that deep inside. You know that if you keep following this train, that you're going to end up dumping right off a cliff. So why let yourself dump off that cliff for the sake of just getting the first draft done? Especially if you know that after draft 1, you're gonna have pretty much an entire manuscript's worth of work to do just to fix it all. And something that really helps me when I'm doing my edit as you go thing is asking things like, what is the purpose of this scene? How does this move the story forward? What is at stake? What problems is the main character facing, and what can she reasonably do to solve it? A lot of times, these questions will help you be like, oh, I already kind of wrote a scene something like this, I don't think I need this one, or oh, we don't really need this third character here, this third character isn't really doing anything but wasting word count space. So with stuff like that in mind, I mean, when you look at it objectively and you really look at it for the sake of the story's health, it becomes a lot easier to just kind of whoops and correct course and move on. But again, as I said, all advice is good and all advice is bad. I gave you the reasons why I am an advocate for editing as you go, but again, maybe you're someone who works better just slapping it all down. That's fine. That's totally okay. If that's your style and that's what helps you get books out, do it. Don't listen to me if, that's not how you know that you work. That's fine. But if you are someone who is just frustrated with your progress and who is unable to feel like they can finish a book because you're constantly just getting to the end and then throwing it out because you don't know how to fix it by the end, definitely let go of the fear of editing as you go. Editing as you go is the thing that solves that, because how much do we want to really put into a project only to realize that we have to kind of put it away forever? There's no bigger heartbreak than doing all that work just to discover that your manuscript is pretty much unviable. But that is my 2 cents on writing and just general craft advice. So, leave a comment, tell me what you think, and I will see you guys next week for a little bit of world building. See ya! By the way, if you want to see these videos 2 weeks earlier, consider subscribing to my Patreon, where you not only get all these videos, but also recipe cards, specific deity profiles, and lots of other interesting things to look at. Video tiers start at $10 a month, so definitely consider checking it out.